Hey, true crime fanatics, this is Claire.
And I'm Andy.
You're tuned in to the Homicide Hobbies podcast, which is a podcast for people who love to hear about the horrendous crimes that people commit. Enjoy. What do you got for us today?
Today, our win is going to be a fairly current case. Our bitch this week was just sentenced in September of 2023. Our where is Ohio. Our who is a 23-year-old girl named Sydney Powell. We're just going to jump on into it. Sydney was convicted on September 28th, 2023 of murdering her mother, 50-year-old Brenda Powell. Brenda was a child life specialist at Akron Children's Hospital for 28 years. She specifically worked in the hematology oncology department.
She was a what? A child life?
She was a child life specialist. So she worked specifically with families and children that were dealing with childhood cancers and blood disorders.
Mm-hmm.
That's a tough job. To do that for nearly 30 years before she's murdered. Yikes. Good for her. I mean, I couldn't. The number of losses she's had to see.
About?
Well, I mean, because you get to know the families and stuff. I couldn't imagine being in a job where you see that many kids struggling to survive and all the things that their families go through. It's just heartbreaking. Sydney was enrolled at the University of Mount Union, and she's in a sorority. Brenda texted her daughter on February 25th of 2020. Why do I always feel like you're scamming me? Now, that was a text from mother to daughter.
Oh, I was like, what?
Her daughter
nothing.
Her daughter responded with, "My grades are good. Thank you very much," which seems like a typical. Yeah. That was February 25th, right? This is a case, Claire, where I feel like the dates are important, okay?
You always feel like the dates are important.
So February 25th was that text message. Why do I feel like you're always scamming me? Mom, my grades are fine. Shut the hell up. Now,
guess who's getting a smack when they get home?
You're not going to appreciate that you just said that in a minute. On March 2nd...
I feel like she's our victim, but I'm just saying, don't talk to your mom like that.
On March 2nd, 2020, Sydney's father, Stephen Powell, tried to log into the parent portal to pay Sydney's tuition, but he couldn't access the page. After a few phone calls to figure out what the hell's going on, Stephen learned that his daughter was no longer enrolled in school. On February 24th, he found out that she was kicked out of school. So February 24th, she was kicked out. And on February 25th is when she sent that text message with her mom took place of like, why do I feel like you're always right? Which is why I say I
appreciate what I fucking said 100% because turns out she was scamming her mother.
She sure fucking was, little brat. So anyway, this is where I feel like Stephen is a typical male, or at least is a lot like my husband, where he's just like scratching his head and he's like, dude, I don't know even how to deal with this situation. And tells Brenda, his wife, you deal with her. And then he uses the excuse of, you deal with tough situations at work, you can de-escalate the situation better than I can. So you go deal with our lion-ass daughter.
He just knew she had a superpower.
Well, that led to Brenda confronting her daughter, Sydney, who was at their house that day. And at that point in time, Sydney was 19 years old. Brenda found out that Sydney was kicked out for poor grades. And when I say poor grades, I mean Sydney failed 3 out of her 4 classes.
Ew.
So the school was like, dude, you're bringing down our GPA here. Get the hell out. But Sydney was lying to everybody and refused to leave the dorms for months. She refused to leave. She continued to attend sorority meetings right up until the day before she went home. So March 2nd, she went to a sorority meeting even though she'd been kicked out for months. And then after being called into the dean's office and being told for the 3rd time, get the hell off the property, Sydney began staying in hotels rather than go home and admit to her parents that she'd flunked out.
Where's she getting that money?
I think that's when she called her mom and was like, hey, I need money for this for school. And her mom was like, dude, I think you're lying, because that's, again, this is where the dates come into play. If she was kicked out on the 24th, on the 25th, I think that's where the text message chain comes into play. And she was asking her parents for money. And her mom was like, why do I feel like you're lying to me?
All the time. Because it's a good
Like,
feeling. Her mom is spot on. Trust your
sure
gut.
is. She knew her daughter. So I think she was asking her parents for money to stay in the hotels, but telling her parents it was for something that she needed for school. Now, what's absolutely crazy is what I'm about to tell you. And that is that when Sydney walks into the kitchen at her parents' house and found out that her mother was on the phone with the university,
She's about
Sydney
to
was
freak
unable
the
to
fuck
control. Yep, she was unable to control her massive adult temper tantrum, and Sydney attacked her mother while she was on the phone with the associate dean of students. The school administrator, who was on the other end of the phone, Michelle Gaffney,
Heard it
and
all.
her coworker John, they were horrified when they started hearing screaming on the other end of the line, followed by 6 or 7 thudding sounds and the line going dead. Michelle tried to call Brenda back several times before a female voice answered and stating that it was Brenda Powell. But Michelle knew the voice on the other end was not the same woman she was speaking to prior to the screaming and the line going dead. And Michelle and her coworker, John Fraser, agreed that the voice on the other line was definitely not Brenda. Unsure of what else to do, John confronted the female voice at the other end and said, "Sydney, I think this is you, not Brenda." And the line went dead. At this point, Michelle and John just kind of blink at each other and they're like, what the hell do we do? They called police and told them, look, we were just on the phone with Brenda Powell. This is her address. We just heard a whole lot of screaming. The line went dead. We tried to call back. After 3.5 minutes, someone answered the phone pretending to be the person we were actually speaking to prior to. So the police go out and do a welfare check, make sure Brenda's okay.
Yeah, they thought they were just checking a box.
Right. When police arrive, they find Sydney, the daughter, curled up in the fetal position in the driveway in a catatonic type state. She would vary between being catatonic or erratic and like hysterical and crying and screaming. So some of the officers stay and try to get her under control and figure out like render aid because they have no idea what's going on. The other police go into the Powell home to find 50-year-old Brenda Powell bleeding profusely but still alive.
Oh, shit.
The police and Sydney's father, Stephen, asked Sydney, what the heck happened to Brenda? Sydney told everybody that there was a break-in. She said that Brenda had told her to run after they heard a window in the back of the house shatter. Sydney said that she ran outside until she heard her mom's screams, and then she turned around and ran back inside and found her mom bloodied on the floor.
Is there a broken window?
In reality,
there's not a broken
Sydney
window.
So just listen. So in reality, Sydney began attacking her mother. Her initial weapon of choice, she picked up a cast iron frying pan and repeatedly beat her mother in the back of the head while she was on the phone. And then once her mother had sufficiently been assaulted with the frying pan, she picked up a giant kitchen knife and repeatedly stabbed her mom. She stabbed her mother in the neck nearly 30 times for 3.5 minutes. She assaulted her mom.
Does she live?
No, she unfortunately does not. Spoiler.
That was
Sydney
such a
brutally
long, excruciating. Ugh.
Yeah, so uncalled for. Her daughter is doing this, and according to the coroner, Brenda had received nearly 30 stab wounds, mainly to her neck, several blunt force trauma to the back of her skull from the frying pan, and she also had cuts to her face, arms, and hands trying to defend herself. Sydney had also cut her own hand while maliciously stabbing her mom in the neck. And when the phone had rang, because the school was calling back, that's when Sydney calmly answered the phone and pretended to be Brenda, which, by the way, that totally made me think of our mother when we were growing up, and she would be like screaming at us, and then the phone would ring and she'd answer the phone and be like, hello. And it was like the personality change blew my mind every time our mother did it. But that's totally what I pictured, was her heavy breathing, covered in blood,
Why would you
standing
answer
over
the...
her mom's corpse and then answering the phone.
How old was she?
This girl's
20 something?
she was 19 when she did this.
So freshman.
Yeah.
My brain hole made her 23 because I was thinking about that one feller that killed his parents.
Well, and I did tell you she's 23 when she's convicted.
Okay, that makes me feel better.
After hanging up the phone, when the university feller was like, dude, we know it's you, Sydney, and she hangs up the phone, Sydney then runs outside. She doesn't run to the back of the house. She goes outside to the back of the house and breaks a window to stage the break-in, and then scurries off to the front yard and lays in the driveway because she figured the police were going to be called.
She at least broke it from the outside, though, right?
She did. That's why I said she ran outside and broke it so the glass went in. The devil's in the details here, and we'll get to it because her trial kind of, I found annoying.
She probably did too.
That's the text message I sent you before we started of her crying.
See, I told you I'd forget. She couldn't hear the details.
Right. Sadly, Brenda, her mom, passes away at the Cleveland Clinic Akron General due to the injuries inflicted on her by her daughter.
Can I say, I do not understand what these little wannabe adults think is going to happen when they build up such a fake life of sordid, just lies. I mean, it's all going to come to a head eventually, and then it's like they don't expect it to. I don't understand how they think. How long do you think you can go on pretending you're in school?
Put a pin in that thought, because I'm not skipping around in my case. I'm getting there, and I went on a tangent as well. So hold your pantyhose.
But there's just so many of them that do this.
I know, it's disturbing.
They live a life of lies, and then are shocked when people discover them. It doesn't
and
seem...
are pissed.
Right.
Like, how dare you be mad that I cost you thousands of dollars to put me through school, flunked out, and have been lying to you for months?
Yeah. I'm gonna be madder.
Sydney, obviously, ends up being arrested for the murder of her mother, Brenda. She was given a $250,000 bond. Would you pay her bond if you were her family?
Sure fucking wouldn't.
Her dad paid her bond. Nope. Her dad paid her bond and pleaded with the prosecutors to not try her because he wants to keep his family together. I was like, what the hell? And then it made me look it up if, like, maybe him and her were divorced and he just wanted to keep his daughter. No, that was his wife. Like, they were married. There didn't appear to be problems. He just couldn't believe that his daughter did this and wanted to keep his family together. But he paid her 10%, which is $25,000, so that she could be out of jail.
Is it possible he believes the break-in story?
No. I'm going to go on a tangent in a minute. But her dad pays her bail, and she's out for nearly 3 years, scot-free, awaiting her trial. And I don't know why, and I couldn't find it because, again, it's a recent case, so there's not a lot of information. But Sydney lived with her grandmother after she was bonded out. So I don't know if she wasn't allowed to return to the house, or if her dad didn't want her there, or there was some sort of protection. I wouldn't want
her paying.
I wouldn't have wanted her to live at my house as her grandmother because, dude, you either just murdered my daughter or my daughter-in-law, and you're batshit crazy. You belong where you belong. So, but she stayed with her grandmother. Now, at a pretrial hearing, that's when her dad, Sydney Powell, asked the courts to please go easy on her and that he didn't think she should be prosecuted for murdering his wife or her mother because he just wanted to keep his family together, and he believes that Sydney had learned her lesson and was in a state of psychosis when the attack occurred.
Does she have a history of medical or mental
issues? She sure fucking doesn't. She has nothing in her childhood that anyone else that has those psychotic breaks with the violence or the drugs or anything like that. She doesn't have any of that in her history.
She just was caught fibbing and wasn't ready to live the consequences of her tales.
She's described by her friends and family and like former teachers and stuff, because she was an honor roll student in high school, as being a bright, bubbly, cheerful person. She's not described as being a loner or anything that you typically would hear about somebody that has experienced some sort of trauma. She has none of that. She has absolutely none of it. She is
An asshole.
described as having a bright, sunny disposition. And on September 7th of 2023, Sydney's trial for the brutal murder of her mother, Brenda, would begin. She pled not guilty by reason of insanity. This case had me so frustrated because Sydney's defense team told the jury that Sydney was in the throes of a psychotic break at the time when she murdered her mom, and she could not appreciate the wrongfulness of her actions. And since the murdering,
Why was she
her
having a
attorneys,
psychotic break?
because her bullshit story got called out. It made her snap. No, she was being held accountable for her actions by being confronted by her mother, and she didn't like hearing.
And she's a smart young lady. That's why she was on the honor rolls.
Yeah,
And
and well, we'll get there. But since the murdering of her mother, her attorney claimed that Sydney had been diagnosed with schizophrenia and was receiving treatment and had good results once they figured out her medications. Now, that led me to doing just a little bit of research on schizophrenia, because when I think of schizophrenics, I think of those fellers that you see like in the movie Ghost that are like walking down the street talking to themselves and like twitching. I realize that's not accurate. And again, I'm referencing a movie, but most people with schizophrenia are not violent. Overall, people with schizophrenia are more likely than others to be harmed by other people. Other people are able to take advantage of them. And for people with schizophrenia are more at risk of self-harm, and violence towards other is greater when the illness is untreated. But if you are schizophrenic, it's not a free pass to become a violent asshole. And typically something happens to you to get you to react. Someone with schizophrenia is more withdrawn. And her friends and family would testify that Sydney had an unbreakable bond with her mother. They were best of friends, and no one could have ever
wasn't
expected this.
unbreakable.
Right? But they said nobody expected this, mainly because nobody saw any signs of anything wrong with Sydney other than she was kind of struggling with college. And shit, the day before she killed her mom, so March 2nd, she participated in her sorority's bachelor viewing party. Now, I don't know if that was a viewing of the show The Bachelor or they were checking out the fraternity single guys. I'm not sure which. I'm going to assume it's the TV show. But she told her friends and her sorority sisters that she was going to go ahead and take a break from school to just figure things out and what she wanted for her life. So she wasn't even telling the truth to them that she flunked out, which I get. That's embarrassing, but she's still lying and creating her alternate reality. And then when the dean testified about the phone call during court, or what she heard during the assault, Sydney sat there with her hands over her ears, crying and trying not to hear what the dean had listened to. And then doctors testified that now, poor little Sydney, she suffers from PTSD because she had to see her mom bloodied and battered. Dude, you fucking did it.
What?
Sorry. Right. Sorry. Not sorry. But so freaking what if she's got PTSD? She caused it. How about own up to the fact that she was kicked out of school and had a massive out of control temper tantrum because her bullshit lies caught up to her. So Sydney tried to claim, she tried to claim that she had hallucinations starting at age 11. And even the psychologist said it's rare for schizophrenic patients to act out violently, let alone have symptoms prior to 13. Most females start showing symptoms in their mid to late 20s. And she was 19 and showed no previous symptoms of having anything wrong with her, like at all. Mm-hmm. So I realize I'm being judgmental, but I call salting up bullshit. I truly do. I think she's lying. I think she's a brat who wasn't used to being no and wasn't used to struggling in school. And I think that she threw that massive temper tantrum because the lies caught up with her when her parents found out that she was kicked out. And the end result was the brutal assault and subsequent murder of her mother.
Yeah, she
It's
had a
just
toddler level meltdown with adult superpowers.
exactly. Okay, this is where it became even more frustrating for me. The jury was informed that in the fall of 2021, now mind you, she killed her mom in the beginning of March of 2020, so almost a year later. Actually, I guess it's like a year and a half later, Sydney was diagnosed with schizophrenia and major depressive disorder. It was also pointed out by her defense team that there was a lack of motive for the murder, which helped persuade the doctors that Sydney was in fact insane and could not tell right from wrong at the time of the murder. So because the doctors didn't understand the motive, they said that proves she was insane. And again, this is where I say salty nuts bullshit. She freaking tried to fake being her mom on the phone to buy herself time and then staged a break-in. That's not insanity.
Yeah, she
That's
already
clear
knew a
thinking.
cover up.
Yeah. And someone that, in my opinion, that is having a psychotic break is not going to have the sound mind to turn around, calmly answer the phone, and then go try to stage a break in and then go curl up in the driveway to act like she just witnessed her mom being assaulted.
Yeah.
That's not crazy. That's being of sound mind. I realize it's a certain level of crazy because of the way you're behaving, but that's different, in my opinion. Now, I'm not a doctor. I'm just little old me and I'm opinionated. But in July of 2023, so right before her trial starts, a neuropsychologist said that Sydney had the schizoaffective disorder bipolar type. And since he is a doctor and that's his medical opinion, he said that she was in an acute psychotic state at the time of the murder. A total of 3 doctors for the defense said they believed that Sydney was batshit crazy when she attacked her mom.
Is that the
Sure
technical
fucking
word for
is.
it?
Sure is.
She's done
Now,
batshit crazy.
this is where I go on my mini tangent here because I think those 3 doctors are the reason that the newer generations are soft little crybabies when things don't go their way.
It's
Because 2 of those doctors made their findings after just reading her file.
she had a
They,
bout of the influenza, or not the what is it? Affluenza. Yeah, there you go.
I just,
'Cause she's
I,
bratty little turd face. Which is
she
where
didn't
I
get
go
her
back
way.
to she needed more spankings early on.
So they don't understand the motive. The motive was that she is not used to not succeeding. She created an alternate world by pretending like she was still in school and lying to everyone. And the doctors were like, that shows that she was not of sound mind. No, that does not prove that she's not of sound mind. That proves that she's a lion ass little brat who's enjoying the party life of school, but not actual schooling.
Yeah.
And that's where I feel like that she expected it to be like the movie Legally Blonde, not to reference yet another movie, but I think she expected it to be more social and simple. And then everything else was like a party. And then she realized that the school part was actually the important part. But by then, she flunked and got kicked out. She's just a brat. But the prosecutors put their psychologist up on the stand, and she testified and said that she took a different approach than the other 3 doctors because by examining what she knew to be true about the case and the assault and Sydney's upbringing and comparing it to her statements and symptoms, it just didn't add up to schizophrenia. She said, noting that what Sydney reported and beginning to experience the symptoms at the age of 11 would make her case extremely rare. Psychologists, the same psychologist for the prosecution, said that among women, the symptoms of schizophrenia, like I said before, surface around mid to late 20s. And she also noted that it would have been rare for these symptoms to go unnoticed by all of her friends, all of her family, all of her teachers through middle school, high school, all the extra activities that she participated in, someone would have seen something, but there was nothing. And this doctor also sat down, unlike some of the men folk that testified for the defense, she actually sat down and interviewed Sydney for 2 hours and diagnosed her with borderline personality traits and unspecific anxiety, and said that Sydney was lying about her symptoms to say that she was schizophrenic.
Anyone surprised that a liar is lying?
Lying? Right. And this doctor also pointed out that most of the defense's doctoring came years after the murder. Like right before the trial began is when they had her assessed. And this is where I would love to see her browser history, because I wouldn't be surprised to see that she looked up schizophrenia symptoms and behaviors, and that's where she came up with her list of things that she could claim. And since the doctors, it's not like there's a blood test for schizophrenia. They just go based off of what she says. And based off of what she said to the one doctor, what he jotted down, the other two read Dr. One's notes, and that's how they came up with their opinion.
Do you know what she was going to school for?
No, I don't.
Because I'd be curious if that's how she knew, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
the things to say.
The doctor for the prosecutors, though, also pointed out that the body cam footage that showed her varying between catatonic and erratic. So someone that's in a catatonic state generally stays in that state for roughly a day, like 24 hours. They don't go back and forth between catatonic and hysterical. Like,
she didn't read that one.
She sure didn't. So the jury had to sit back after listening to this for roughly 2 weeks, and they had to decide if they felt that Sydney was guilty or innocent. What do you think? Do you think they found her guilty or innocent?
I hope for fuck's sake that they found her guilty, because she is fucking guilty.
On September 20th, 2023, the jury deliberated.
Make me mad.
They deliberated for 9 hours and 23 minutes before they returned with the guilty verdict for purposeful murder, felony murder, felonious assault, and tampering with evidence. On September 28th, so 8 days later, the judge sentenced the now 23-year-old Sydney Powell to 15 years to life for the brutal slaying of her mother, Brenda. Yeah.
She's going to be
15 years. Especially because there's nobody asking to keep her ass in there. So the second she's up for parole, and her dad, and assuming her grandma's still alive, go to the parole board and they're like, please, please, please let her out. She learned her lesson. She's on her medications. She's going to be out.
It's disgusting.
And on a side note, the Akron Children's Hospital created a Brenda K. Powell Memorial Scholarship. The scholarship is for graduating high schoolers who are or were patients of the hematology or oncology department and want to further their education. So they created that in honor of Brenda, which I found kind of disturbingly ironic because it was over her daughter being kicked out.
Yeah.
Like, it's a little sick, but
this way
it's nice that they did something.
Yeah, this way she'll actually be paying for somebody to attend school that deserves to be there. Spoiled little brat.
My whole thing is she wasn't crazy.
No.
And I would be so disappointed in Jason if one of my children, let's say my oldest, who, by the way, very similar to Sydney, he was a straight A student. Not talking shit about my son. I know he will probably hear this.
We're just saying facts.
It is facts. And if he don't like it, tough boogers. But he went to college, a private college. He was a straight A student in high school, went off to school, realized the party life because he didn't do any of that in high school, and forgot that he had to actually do his schoolwork. And because he was over 18, they wouldn't allow us to see his grades unless he agreed to show them to us. And he refused and said that he was going to take some time off. In December, when he came home for Christmas, he wasn't going to go back because he needed to think about what he wanted to do with his life. Turns out he partied and hung out with other people and he got kicked out for failing out. And then his scholarship was revoked. And guess what? Guess who got slapped with a tab? I wasn't very happy. But this case made me think of him because I was like, man, didn't realize that there could be a completely different way that could have gone down. But this case was just like, no, but it made me mad though that like 3 doctors testified that they thought she was crazy. She wasn't crazy. She knew what she was doing, and it's not schizophrenia that she lived in an alternate reality. She created that alternate reality because she didn't want to go home. She wanted to continue to hang out with her friends. So,
piece of shit.
I don't know. Just, she's a brat. And I would be so mad at Jason if one of my kids, if my oldest killed me for confronting him for getting kicked out of school, and he's like, please don't testify, or please don't prosecute him.
We can stick with if any of your children. We don't have to just stick it to the oldest. Watch your back.
You know what's creepy as hell though? And for those that don't want to continue to listen, you can turn this off because pretty much done. But my 14-year-old, he started sleepwalking recently. And then I'm a light sleeper. So when the floorboard creaked and I opened my eyes and he's just standing in my bedroom doorway, staring into nothing, like just staring off into space. And I was like, what are you doing? And then he walked back to his bedroom and then he was gone for like 30 minutes. And then all of a sudden I heard the floor creak again and he was back. And then he disappeared again. And then he came back. Then all of a sudden he goes in the bathroom in our bedroom and gets in the shower and starts taking a shower and then goes back to bed. The next morning, I was just like, dude, what was going on with you last night? Just couldn't sleep. And he's like, what are you talking about? I was like, you paced up and down the hallway. You took a shower. What were you doing? And he's like, what? No, I didn't. And I was like, dude, check your Fitbit because we compete with our steps. He had like 140 steps that he had gotten in the middle of the night. And he's like, what? I was like, yeah. So that's a little creepy.
It's a lot creepy.
This case, though, it made me frustrated that 2 of the doctors that testified on Sydney's behalf didn't really talk to her. They read what another doctor's findings were and said, yep, we agree. She was crazy. And I don't think the first doctor was accurate. I think she threw a temper tantrum, got called out by her parents, and didn't know how to react because this up-and-coming generation is a bunch of softy little brats.
Mm-hmm. They sure done are.
You tell them no or call them out on their bullshit, and they throw a massive temper tantrum.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, the adult toddlers is what they are because they can't do anything for themselves, and they can still throw fits and expect that that's okay or accepted. No.
Yeah, last year's Thanksgiving episode, for example. They found out he was lying about his schooling, so he killed them because they were going to cut him off financially. So he killed them, tried to stage it, and then realized how much effort went into cleaning up a murder scene.
Dropping hands everywhere.
Or the feller I just did a couple weeks ago that killed his mom because she told him he couldn't have permission to kill himself.
I feel like your subconscious is trying to warn you of your children.
No, it's my search history trying to warn me. Because these cases pop up as something I might be interested in between the prostitution killings and, I should see why my son, how he's making his money. He does work nights. Mm-hmm. I'm just kidding.
Sort of. Sure. If we laughed to keep from crying. No, you wouldn't appreciate it.
If you were my son's friend and you know who I'm talking to and you hear this case and you play it for him, we're going to be fighting, sir. He don't need to listen to it unless he stumbles upon it on his own. Don't go tattletaling.
Snitches get stitches.
Snitches are bitches. Anyway.
Thank you for listening to Homicide Hobbies. I'm Claire.
I'm Andy.
Follow us each week to get your fix of the atrocities that occur in true crime. And don't forget to tell people about us and rate us if you like us. But don't rate us if you didn't. Just change the